Welcome everyone. In the run-up to the most anticipated F1 season in memory, 2025, we are going to run through every single driver who is going to be starting this season on the grid and have a look at what they need to do in this season for it to be a success. So let's start with our first driver, and that is Lando Norris. Last season was Lando Norris's best season yet. It was his 6th season in F1, and he not only secured his first win in the sport, but ended the year with 4. And he also challenged for a Drivers' World Championship. Well, loosely, anyway. And many would say that 2024 was a defining season for him. However, I think this season in 25 is going to be more important than last year in regards to where Lando Norris's career in F1 ends up heading. So let's have a look at the reasons for that and what Lando of course needs to do to ensure that this season is a success for him. Let's start with the most obvious, and that is to beat his very talented and highly rated teammate Oscar Piastri. Now, it does not mean that he must beat Oscar as comprehensively as last year, to which, before many of you say he didn't beat Oscar comprehensively, yes he did. The head-to-head is quite damning, to be honest with you, especially considering Oscar finished every single race throughout the season. Now, some of you will come at me straight away and say, what about Abu Dhabi? That wasn't Oscar's fault. Max took him out at the first corner. Yes, that is true. However, I will counter that with the fact that no one was on the pace of Lando throughout the duration of that Abu Dhabi weekend, and even as if Oscar had survived the first corner, there's no way that he would have overtaken Lando. I don't believe so. Lando clearly had the pace advantage over Oscar that weekend, as he did throughout many of a race weekend in 2024. And in addition to this, the driver's standings, Oscar finished in P4, 2 places behind his teammate and a further 78 points back. And well, anyone who even suggests that Oscar had a better season than Lando, it's just being outright disrespectful to Lando and the actual overall season that he had in 2024. Now yes, Oscar did have a great run of form in the middle part of the season, but the beginning and end of the season were quite poor considering he had the consistently most fastest car across the season. Something that Lando gets a lot of stick for, but at least Lando was consistently fighting for race wins, unlike Oscar was. But Oscar did show us in that mid-season run why he is so highly rated, why he was able to win back-to-back F3 and F2 titles. And in the short time that he has been in F1, he has shown a tremendous amount of progression, and that's no doubt going to continue into his 3rd season. Now, as they say, the first person you have to beat in F1 is your teammate, because you are, in most instances, in equal machinery. There is never a guarantee, even after a great previous season, that your car is going to be able to compete for consistent race wins. And well, for McLaren, we hope that this is the case, because we want to see Lando and Oscar fighting for race wins, and we want a tight championship battle, hopefully one that is even closer than we had in 2024. And for Lando, it's not about beating Oscar to ensure that he avoids comments of being called a bottle job or that he's washed. No, it is to ensure that he gains that all-important priority within the McLaren team, if priority is even a thing that McLaren understand. As we all remember, McLaren didn't exactly back Lando in the Drivers' Championship until it was arguably too late, considering after they begged him on the radio at Hungary to give the place back to Oscar, pleading with him and telling him that no one wins a championship on their own.
5 laps to go. The way to win a championship is not by yourself, it's with the team. You're going to need Oscar and you're going to need the team.
Only for them to then refuse to want to put in team orders in place for their more experienced, longer serving, and most importantly at the time, more mathematically viable driver to win the championship. Now, before you come at me in the comments, I understand just because a driver has been at a team for longer than the other, it doesn't automatically mean you get that priority treatment. But considering for all the reasons we just mentioned, it felt odd that McLaren were unwilling to give that priority treatment to Lando. And many said at the time that Lando should have just been quicker. Of course, I'm referring to Monza. But at the end of the day, F1 has always had team orders. It has always been a fundamental part for drivers winning a world championship. Many modern day F1 fans would be foaming at the mouth if they went back in time and watched some of the things that Michael Schumacher's teammates at Ferrari were ordered to do. So for Lando's 2025 season, he has to beat Oscar at a bare minimum for it to be a success, because we're all hoping that McLaren can put a decent car together again, and that they find themselves fighting for race wins consistently, so that we have a multi-team battle for the Drivers' World Championship. But if he doesn't, that's what he needs to do. And if he does, well, it's going to be very intriguing how McLaren handled the situation between the two drivers, because if Lando does find himself in the same position again as he did in 2024, at least where he is more mathematically viable to win the championship, especially compared to his teammate, will McLaren back him? I think they have to. Otherwise, Lando is well within his rights to go, hang on a second, what's happening here? Completely outperformed my teammate 2 years in a row when we've had a championship winning car, and you have not backed me. Sorry, I'm up and I'm leaving. And that will go a long way in regards to Lando's reputation up and down the paddock. The second thing Lando needs to do in 2025 for it to be a success, and for him to ever win a World Drivers' Championship, is to improve his wheel-to-wheel battles and stop trying to overtake around the outside, especially when you come up against Max Verstappen. Now, whether we like it or not, we know that the racing rules currently state that you have to be ahead at the apex for it to be your corner. If you do that, then you're entitled to force the car, if you're on the inside that is, you're allowed to force the driver on the outside off the racing surface. It is your corner. They no longer are entitled to racing room. I personally don't agree with this. I think racing room should be left at all times if you have a significant portion of the car alongside. I still think front wheels to rear axle for the overtaking car on the defending car is fair, but hey ho, F1 likes to make things difficult. But of course, this gives all the power to the inside car. Very rarely does the overtaking car on the outside make the move stick, as especially we saw at the latter stage of the season, because the inside car just knows how the racing rules are applied. And no one knows how the racing rules are applied better than Max Verstappen. And Lando just could not, or he just refused to try and overtake Max Verstappen up the inside. Actually, he also refused to defend the inside from Max Verstappen. Circuit of the Americas as an example. Even in Mexico, where yes, he had learned from the race prior in Circuit of the Americas, and he was able to get ahead of the apex around the outside at Mexico, and he was able to gain that position, but he only gained it for a very brief amount of time, because a couple of corners later, we know what happened with Max Verstappen, forcing Lando off, trying to go for a head at the apex rule. In my opinion, it was a professional foul, but anyway, Max knew what he was doing, and he was allowed to do that because there was room up the inside. And Lando left it open and left an opportunity for Max to do that. But it's not just Max who Lando has come out second best to when wheel to wheel. His teammate in the infamous Monza race, Papaya Rules, where Oscar Piastri made a tremendous overtake around the outside at the second chicane. But Lando was in control of that corner. He was on the inside heading to that corner, and while it was an acute angle for Lando, he could have used the ahead at the apex rule, the racing regulations to his advantage, and forced his teammate wide. It might not have gone down too well back at headquarters, but ultimately Lando's the one who had that mathematical advantage and was more viable of an opportunity to win the Drivers' Championship. How dare his teammate try to make an overtake around the outside at that chicane? If that was Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso in Lando's position, there's no way in hell that Oscar Piastri would have pulled off that overtake. The audacity of his teammate to be able to do that. And that's where Lando, unfortunately, has fallen down and where he needs to improve for 2025. Because if Lando wants to become a World Drivers' Champion, he has to go toe-to-toe with Max, with Lewis, with Charles, with George in the future. In this season, hopefully, which all us F1 fans are really hoping for. And he needs to realise that the racing rules are the way they are and you need to use them to your advantage, because those names I just reeled off, they most definitely will do. I've said it before, but basically the crux of it is Lando needs to be more selfish and be a bit more of a dick and don't worry about pleasing people. And lastly, if Lando is provided another consistently fast car across the duration of the season where he can win multiple races, well, he has to convert those race wins. Lando, we know, is a quick driver. Heck, he had 8 pole positions in 2024, not including sprint races. He had 10 front row starts, yet he was only able to convert 4 race wins. He should have arguably had double the amount of race wins that he had. And while on one hand, that's not bad for a driver who, as we mentioned, entered the season without a race win and left with 4, he should have ended up with a lot more considering his experience. His 6th season in F1 it was last year. And unfortunately for Lando, this gained him a bit of a reputation as a bottle job and lots of jokes going around about his race starts. Now, I don't quite subscribe to this narrative. I think that while, yes, Lando in races, as we've mentioned, especially wheel to wheel, have meant that he hasn't been able to convert more race wins, don't think the poor race starts have been entirely his own fault. I did do a video on this in the middle of last season and look back at every single one of Lando's pole positions at the time. And there's a lot more when you look into the detail of Lando's starts. And I don't think really, while yes, some of them are his faults, not all of them can be attributed to him. And well, in the second half of the season after that video, Lando's race starts did get tremendously better, excluding Brazil, of course. But while not converting race wins will, of course, affect a successful season in 2025 if he has the machinery underneath him to do so, it can have a more longer lasting impact on his overall reputation and F1 career. Because while Lando is quick, if he is continually throwing away race wins and too inconsistent and is seen as a bottle job, not just by the fans, but by those up and down the paddock, and someone who potentially cannot handle the pressure, then that could affect another top team, i.e. Red Bull, i.e. Mercedes, in the future, acquiring his services, and him falling down the pack, and maybe into the realm of just being one of the quickest top midfield drivers. It sounds extreme of a scenario, but never say never in F1. Stranger things have happened. Overall though, I do think Lando is going to have another great season regardless of what I've just mentioned. Yes, those will be influential into whether it is a success or not, but I think he's got it in him. I think he's going to kick on from what overall was a very positive 2024. No one truly expected McLaren or Lando to put up a championship fight last year, and I think it caught them quite off guard. And maybe Lando had a bit of naivety, maybe with not having the full backing of McLaren and them not having the full belief of them being able to win the Drivers' Championship, more focus on the constructors than it was the personal one of the drivers. But that contributed, unfortunately, to Lando not being more aggressive and more selfish when it came to his own desires of wanting to win that Drivers' World Championship that many, and myself included, believe should have been at minimum a lot closer. And while the gap was large, it was, in my opinion, fully there for the taking. So for anyone who says he won't win a World Drivers' Championship or even have the opportunity to fight for another World Drivers' Championship because of what happened in 2024, well, I take you back to 2007 when Lewis Hamilton, in his rookie season, had just lost out on his first world title. Many said the same about him, and we'll look what he followed it up with the next season, and look at where he is now. Didn't turn out too bad for him, did it?